Here is what you need to know about ancient Mesopotamia. I'm going to be using the acronym GRAPES to make this video. For those that don't know, GRAPES stands for Geography, Religion, Achievements, Politics, Economics, and Social Structure. So let's begin with the G in GRAPES, Geography. Ancient Mesopotamia, which is now modern-day Iraq, was born in a place called the Fertile Crescent, also called the Cradle of Civilization. The word Mesopotamia means a land between two rivers. These two rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates. The biblical and historical significance of this is that these two rivers, along with two other rivers that we don't know about, are mentioned in the Bible when describing the original location of the Garden of Eden. Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that the first recorded civilization is located precisely, or at least close to the original location of the Garden of Eden? I don't know. What do you think? But moving on to the R in grapes, religion. This is my favorite. From what we can see, Mesopotamia was a very polytheistic civilization, meaning that they worshipped many gods. In fact, they believed in over 3,000 deities. Here are a few of the main ones. Number 1, we have Anu, the supreme god. Anu was the god of the sky. They believed that he was the father of all of the deities and that he was also listed as one of the 3 gods involved with creating the universe. Number 2, we have Enki, the god of water and of wisdom. Enki was said to reside in Abzu, which the Mesopotamians believed was a freshwater ocean located beneath the earth that was the source of all the streams, rivers, and lakes. One of Enki's primary roles was as a creator deity along with Anu, as he was one of the 3 Mesopotamian gods involved in making the universe. Enki was also credited with making the first humans out of clay, and he was believed to have created the Tigris and Euphrates rivers out of his, semen. Yes, I know that's a little weird. But in addition to being the god of water and wisdom, Enki was associated with trickery, magic, and fertility. By the way, guys, I just want to make this very clear. I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm just saying that this is what the ancient Mesopotamians believed. So it's interesting. But lastly, number 3, we have Enlil, the god of air, storms, and earth. He was believed to have control over the fates of the universe, and his commands were unalterable. He was listed with Anu and Enki as one of the 3 gods involved in the creation of the universe. However, the Mesopotamians viewed Enlil as a god of both destruction and creation, as they believed that this deity was primarily responsible for natural disasters and catastrophes. In fact, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we will be discussing later, Enlil is responsible for sending the Great Flood that almost wipes out all of humanity. Now, what does that sound like? But before we get into that, let's move on to the A in grapes, achievements. Let's begin with their creation of the ziggurat, which I personally find the most interesting. The ziggurat is a pyramid-like shaped building that was constructed for the sole purpose of worshiping gods. They were built very tall, with multiple levels and stairs in between. In fact, they were usually the tallest buildings in the city, and they reached toward the heavens, where supposedly the gods were thought to dwell, and it was a place where people would come to pay reverence to their god and offer sacrifices. Many people like to claim that the Tower of Babel story comes from the ziggurat. Maybe King Nimrod from the Bible was trying to build the world's largest ziggurat to worship a false god. I mean, that kind of makes sense. But maybe the ziggurats were even the original inspiration for the Great Pyramids. But what other achievements come from the Mesopotamians? Well, other than creating the wheel, mud bricks, cities, maps, and even our modern day 60-second, 60-minute time standard, they created the first form of writing, which is called cuneiform. These were found on clay tablets, which told of many interesting stories. My 2 favorite stories that come from these ancient tablets are 1, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and 2, the story of the Anunnaki. Let me give you a brief summary of these 2 stories. I think you're going to find this extremely interesting. The Epic of Gilgamesh is about the king of an ancient city called Uruk. Gilgamesh, who was 2/3 god and 1/3 man, was a magnificent being who ordered the construction of many buildings. This was all done by forced labor, and the people of Uruk began to despise him due to his lack of empathy. Gilgamesh was known for possessing and I'm just using that word because I don't want to get it flagged, but for possessing any woman he chose, whether it was a wife of his servants, priest, or nobleman. He did not care. The people prayed to the gods that somebody would keep Gilgamesh in check, and the gods in turn created a being named Enkidu, who was part man and part animal. Fast forward in the story, Enkidu steps up to Gilgamesh during a wedding where Gilgamesh demanded to possess the bride. This led to a long fight where Gilgamesh and Enkidu actually end up becoming friends. Both of the beings go on adventures together searching for immortality. They wanted to live forever, but eventually, Enkidu dies of an illness inflicted by the gods. Gilgamesh then travels to the edge of the world where he is to learn about the pre-flood world from the man who survived it. This man was told by the gods that they were going to destroy the earth due to its evil. He was instructed to build a boat and load up the animals. Does that sound familiar? But in conclusion, the man tells Gilgamesh that only the gods can grant eternal life, and Gilgamesh ends up returning to Uruk and facing the harsh reality of life, that everyone must die. Believe it or not, but that is a very, very condensed version of the story. If you guys ever want me to, I will make the longer video describing the whole thing. Just let me know below in the comments. But moving on to story number 2, the Anunnaki/astronaut gods. Some ancient Sumerians believe that long ago, on a planet named Nibiru, there was a group of advanced beings called the Anunnaki. The planet of the Anunnaki was dying due to a bad climate. The Anunnaki needed gold to help reverse engineer the planet to bring it back to life. They decided to travel to Earth to find this gold. This is why people refer to them as the astronaut gods. But when the Anunnaki got to Earth, the planet was covered in only animals, so they decided to settle in ancient Mesopotamia, where they created a beautiful city. In this city, there was a garden named Eden. Shortly after, the Anunnaki started their gold extraction underground. They had brought a group with them called the Ajiji, who were the slaves of another alien race. After years of forced labor, the Ajiji rebelled against the Anunnaki, in which they were defeated and eternally destroyed. But now the Anunnaki needed new workers that were less harmful and more submissive than the Ajiji. This led to the Anunnaki mixing their DNA with the ancestors of human beings. Pause. This makes me think of the book of Genesis when it talks about the sons of God coming down to earth, choosing any woman they'd like and having offspring with them, which the Bible calls Nephilim. But I don't know, that's just me. Anyway, this led to malfunctioning beings who were extremely strong, but very dumb. The first man to have successfully been created without any issues was named Adumu, spelled A-D-A-M-U. Kinda sounds like Adam from the book of Genesis. But anyway, humans began to overpopulate the city, which led to the exile from the Garden of Eden. Fast forward in time, a great flood happened on the earth, and in order to save their creation, the Anunnaki created large boats to survive. They ended up leaving Earth, but before they left, they gave all knowledge of war, jewelry, agriculture, and more to the humans. I mean, this is some crazy stuff, and I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. If you're enjoying it, please click like and subscribe. Thank you. But let's move on to the P in Grapes, which stands for politics. Mesopotamia, from what we know, were led by kings. But how are these leaders chosen? Mesopotamian leaders, often kings of the city-states, would rise to power in one of 3 ways. 1, they had to be the son of a previous king. 2, they could be proven worthy through military victory. Or 3, they show that the gods have chosen him or her to be kings, but 99.9% of the time, it was a dude. Government officials would do the bidding of the king. They would help lead in public buildings, work on taxing the people, and do things related to the relationship between the temple and the royal house, and other such duties. They would help the city-state function efficiently in accordance to the will of the king, so the king basically had absolute power, and these men did anything that he asked. And how are the politics and religion of Mesopotamia connected? Well, obviously, ancient Mesopotamians viewed the divine realm and the human realm to be closely linked, so that one realm affected the other. We can see this from all those stories that we were reading about earlier. They were very, very connected to the religion. The gods were much more powerful than the kings and priests and could thus control and guide them. But the kings and priests would also show their power to the people by receiving and explaining the will of the gods. Kings were human representatives of the city-state's patron deity, and priests took care of the temple cult, an important center for Mesopotamian life. It was nearly impossible for politics to stay away from religion and vice versa, so both realms of influence worked together. Now, let's cover the E in grapes, economics. They had to trade. Mesopotamian civilizations put up docks so that ships could easily land there. When ships did arrive, the merchants traded food, clothing, jewelry, wine, and other goods from the cities. So how did they buy and sell the goods that they were trading? Well, they used the standard system of barter. For example, 1 goat for 2 bowls of rice. But they also used their own money or currency. They didn't use paper money or coins yet, but they ended up using barley for local trade. Because barley was heavy, they used lead, copper, bronze, tin, silver, and gold as currency to buy things away from their local area. You had to borrow barley from a barley banker, and the banker charged very high interest. For example, in agriculture, for farming, when people think of Iraq and Mesopotamia and you ask them about the land, they would say that it was all desert. I mean, even today, when we look at modern day Iraq, you just think of a massive desert. While some of it was a desert, people actually lived in quite lush and fertile places because they lived in between the rivers. Again, this is the Tigris and Euphrates. And there was great wildlife to catch, fish in the rivers, and plenty of edible vegetation. When people learned how to farm and keep a supply of food, they found that they could grow their own food if they tended to the land. After this, they figured out how to create crops in abundance. As Mesopotamian farmers got better and better at farming, they started growing wheat, barley, dates, cucumbers, onions, apples, and many different herbs and spices. And they also raised sheep, goats, and cattle. Speaking of economics, it's important to bring the slavery aspect into this, and I'll explain. Most people who were slaves in Mesopotamia were captured from war or from having their village, town, city, etc. destroyed. The people who destroyed their living place took people who survived the destruction and made them slaves. This has basically been going on for all of history. But lastly, let's move on to the S in grapes, which stands for social structure. From the previous information, we can see that the hierarchy of this civilization was pretty simple. The pantheon of gods were at the very top. The demigods/deities would be right below them, the kings of each city would be next, and the priests would actually be higher than the farmers, traders, and barters, which in some civilizations is kind of backwards, but the priests would have been next. So the middle class, again, would have been comprised of farmers, traders, and barters, and lastly, servants and slaves would be at the very bottom. So it's kind of like most civilizations today, other than the fact of the priests being right below the kings. Some governments work like that today, but it's not too common. So I hope you guys like this video. I made this script in about 2 or 3 hours, so I kind of rushed through it a little bit, but I thought I did a pretty good job. Honestly, if you're still watching, I hope that you like and subscribe and that you share this, because I really am putting in a lot of work to this, and I appreciate it. So, catch y'all later. Peace.